Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's parent webinar presented by Curro Learning Support in collaboration with Curro Learning and Development. This evening's topic is talking with your child, age-appropriate communication at every stage. Our presenter tonight is Samantha Rotaro. She's an educational psychologist and project manager at Curro Learning Support. Samantha has extensive experience supporting learners, parents, and teachers in navigating emotional and learning challenges. She's passionate about equipping families with practical strategies to foster well-being and resilience. Samantha will introduce our expert speakers for this evening just now. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section of this webinar. The team will answer them either during or at the end of the webinar. And with that, it's over to you, Samantha.
Evening, everybody. Welcome to our first parent webinar of 2025. We're excited to be with you, and I'm excited to share our stories this year and to walk the journey of 2025 or 2020 Thrive together. So tonight we are blessed to have Tanya Loynes from Curro Durbanville's preschool and Blanche Powell from Curro Eitzig, and they are both experienced teachers as well as moms. And we are going to be tapping into their life knowledge as well as their work knowledge this evening. And it's always wonderful to share our knowledge as parents, as well as experts in our field, because I think knowing it, living it really adds value and brings hope to all of us parents that we will survive all these ages and all these different stages. So evening, Tanya.
Evening.
Evening, Blanche.
Hi there.
Tanya will be chatting to us about the infant to school age children, and Blanche will then talk us through from school age through adolescence and young adults that she has in her home now. As we start, I'm going to just give us a little bit of an introduction as to what are the developmental ages and stages that we're looking at, because the whole topic for this evening is how we need to adapt our communication as our children develop and why it's important to do so. So I'm going to share my screen and we will have a look at the different stages, and I'm just going to give you a brief summary of the stages as we see them. So Erikson developed the theory many, many years ago of psychosocial development stages in children through to maturity. And the theory goes that at each stage of development, a person faces a certain challenge, and the way that they work through that conflict in the end of that particular stage is how they carry it through in their lifelong journey. And he starts with infancy, talking about infancy being a time of trust versus mistrust. So we all know that infants work more with sounds and words and coos and cries and babbles rather than language, but it's an extremely important time of language development. It's also an important time of nurturing, where repetition is very important, eye contact is very important, and the virtue developed in that time is one of hope. Can I trust the people around me? Can I trust my caregivers? And that's where the importance of nurturement, the importance of holding, rocking, affection, all of those things are essential. Then we move through to early childhood, and that's very much a toddler age, 1 to 3 years old, where they start to work with the conflict of autonomy versus shame or doubt. This is not a negative shame or doubt. It is more the understanding of, when you're starting to fight with, I'll hold my spoon myself and I'll hold my sippy cup, but then it all falls on the floor. This is where us as parents are scrambling to buy that no mess cup and the no mess bowls, where even if it flies off the feeding chair, it's not going to end up dog food. So it's that time where they're struggling to understand independence. So can I trust myself? And our communication with our children has to change in that time. It's going from infancy, where it's all about the love and showing in eye contact, the smiling, the giggling, showing positivity, where when we come to early childhood, we start to use gestures and expressions. and words. And they start to understand that I can trust myself. In other words, when they have tummy time or they're sitting and they're playing on the mat while mom's cooking and they're pulling out all the pots and pans, it's that period where they are learning, you know what, I can trust myself to pull this pot out. And I can either doubt myself because my mom is shouting at me when I pull it out, I'm just investigating, or there is an allowance and an opportunity to develop autonomy by pulling it out and playing with it. So it's that language of how am I communicating to my child that autonomy is okay. Toilet training is very important in that time. Being able to toilet train, be able to dress themselves, choosing their own toys to play with. You'll see, and I'm sure Tanya will talk to us about in the playroom and in the classroom where they're all fighting over the toys and wanting the autonomy of being able to choose for themselves. So they're learning to trust themselves. Then we look at the preschooler age, initiative versus guilt. They're still extremely concrete at this age. We talk about them wanting to exert control and explore the environment. And here we see a lot of the hitting and the biting and the throwing and the tasting of the Play-Doh and the tasting of the crayons, and because they are exploring their environment. They've learned to trust adults around them. They've taken autonomy over themselves and the space around them. And now they're starting to take initiative and manipulate things around them. So they start to engage with friends. They start to ask why questions. They start the turn taking. They start with, but she's wearing her rabbit ear hat to school. Why can't I wear my rabbit ear hat to school? They're starting to engage. And again, your communication as a parent has to adapt. When we move into school age, stage of development, industry versus inferiority, here we're talking more about social development and the child starting to develop competence. Can I, or how can I contribute to this environment? They start to become overly aware of each other and of how well the friend does. So Sally can write her letters, but why can't I? And here our communication changes once again into listening, into providing positive reinforcement, into showing them that they are doing well and they are competent. Erickson then talks about adolescence being identity versus role confusion. When we talk about role confusion here, it's not am I male or female. It's role confusion as I've built my identity as the class clown, for example. But my value system is telling me to steer by the rules, do what needs to be done, but my identity that I created socially contradicts with my identity that fits my value system. So there our conversations are changed completely again with our children and become much more, in our family we do this, in our value system we do this, in our church or in our family unit we don't speak to each other like that. It becomes very much understanding my identity, who am I and what is important. And then obviously into young adulthood, where we look at intimacy versus isolation. And here your whole communication is family. You are part of a unit. What is your value in that unit? And you contribute to that unit. And they might be finding that they are trying to isolate themselves from the home unit, but always having that intimacy, that intimate relationship with the family is so important. So you can see how this topic speaks to all the stages of development, and Blanche and Tanya are going to share with us on how we move through those stages. So Tanya, when we talk about, just stop sharing so we can chat a bit. When we talk about our younger learners, and we think about creating a safe and supportive environment for our children, what would you say for those ones, from infancy all the way to the school age, the 12-year-olds? what are some of the tips that you can give our parents listening about how communication adapts in that time?
I can say that, I mean, I on a daily basis deal with children from youngest in our school currently is 15 months, and I currently have a 12 and a 14-year-old in my house. So I have an array of communication on a daily basis that I need to do, and it is vastly different. And I think one of the biggest things is you need to adapt. It can happen overnight, that it shifts very quickly. But one of the biggest rules that I follow is your manner and your tone that you approach the conversation is very important. If you go in with aggressive or quite despondent about the conversation, that will be set the tone for it. Eye contact, open-ended questions, encourage a dialogue. So even with our little ones, if I'm going into the classroom and we're having a conversation about something, go down to their level and you're actually corresponding with them on their level and showing interest. Yes, the conversation might sway and be completely distracted by something else, but you can bring them back to what the conversation is. And especially if you are in a situation where a child has done something that you're not entirely happy with the behavior, is that you can use the wording of, I need to understand. Can you explain to me? And then they can, and again, they can go off onto a tangent, but at least you've opened up the dialogue. And also, especially now with our older ones, that dialogue might not happen instantly because you have the time for it now. So when you get to your primary school age, and as they are shifting to your older age, 12 and 13, you might have to just open that conversation and say, well, think about it. When we are ready, we can discuss it further. So the way you approach it is very much up to you as the adult, in how you are going to set the tone for the conversation. And respond to your children.
Responding, I think that is so important to respond to what they're saying. So when you're sitting at home and you have a three-year-old and a 6-year-old and you're talking boundaries, how would that look? I mean, I'm not going to tell my 3-year-old that this is the boundary and you may not put pictures in your sister's book, and I'm not going to use all those words. So how is that going to look different?
Children at this age, in the preschool years, they are, you need to give them real life experiences to be able to understand it. So when we're very tactile with it. So if there's a situation, whether it be at school or in your home situation, where they've hurt one another or have done something, you need to give them physical evidence of what they have done. Always explain to them that you are not happy with the situation or how it played out, the behavior. I love you dearly, but this has made your brother sore, or you cannot do that. They might respond with shut down completely, as little ones sometimes do, and do that pulling away, and then they don't want to talk to you. But always encourage the fact that you always have to remain the adult in that situation, and allow them. We can't be their best friends. We have to adult them. They are going to push boundaries, and they want us to let them know where the line cannot be crossed. So again, I would say just use I would say with that, it's telling them about the behavior and what is more acceptable behavior to use in future.
So I think that's important, providing the concrete, so something that I can understand, but then also providing the solution and the expectation. So it doesn't really help me at 3 or 4 to say, we don't hit people. It's going to be a case of, we don't hit people because it hurts. If you're feeling angry, what can you do? And to provide examples. So, I mean, with the older child, a 6, 7-year-old, you can say, what can you do? But with the 3, 4-year-old, you can say, instead of kicking, maybe we could punch the couch, or, what examples could you give them? What coping mechanisms, Tanya?
Yeah. I think completely is I give them options. So sometimes if a child will be stuck in a situation that they feel that they need to get out of. And children at this age, their quickest way of communicating is with a physical action sometimes, instead of trying to verbally express how they can tell you what their friend has done or what their brother or sibling has done. So they will do a physical action to show you that they aren't happy with it. Giving them alternatives of how to actually do it, and removing them sometimes from that situation before it plays out, is ideal. We obviously can't always get to those moments in the minute that it's happening, but also to not linger on once you've dealt with it, we've taught them the lesson, we move on. To then harp on it constantly afterwards and remind your child. And I think it used to be that old wonderful thing of wait until your father gets home.
Yeah.
It's my mom never did that with us. You found out instantly. But it was deal with the situation right now. Don't let it linger and put that fear in them of what is the repercussion that's going to come. You need to deal with it immediately, show and set the example, and move on. And it's the same with the other one that's been hurt. So in a situation where two children are in the situation, we always acknowledge the fact that the child got hurt. And let the child see that we are acknowledging the child that actually did get hurt in the situation or whatever it may be. And that's where they get the visual from, is that you've hit your brother and you can see he's upset. I don't like this action, but I love you, but we need to show, please will you just show him that you didn't mean it. So there's a lot of coaching that goes involved. And yes, it is easy to just shout across the kitchen, or if you're making dinner and you're multitasking, it is the easiest solution, but they need you to stop in that moment, because sometimes they don't have the control to stop. They need you to intervene, to say to them, enough now. You've hit the limit. And mom's patience.
That's the thing. That's so important. And I know Blanche sees it in her classroom as well, where they don't know necessarily when to stop. So we're talking all the way up to 8, 9 years old. If there's a sibling rivalry happening, they can't tell where that limit is between, okay, we're disagreeing here, and then when it is too intense and when we're actually causing harm, whether it be emotional or physical. And that's where adults really do need to step in.
And it's always a case of waiting when the one will always try and outdo the other one before you get to that point. So they'll keep on going.
Yeah.
And you have to intervene at some point.
Yes. I mean, conflict is healthy, but we've got to intervene. And that's where active listening comes in, because it's important that both parties feel validated. And we can only do that through active listening. But obviously I can't show regular active listening with a busy toddler. I mean, I'm going to go down to their level and I'm going to try and start talking to them, and they're going to be off with the dog over the couch. What is the difference between active listening at that age of 3 to 5 and the active listening with a 6 to 12-year-old? How do you see it as different?
With them is that the children do at that point know what is right and wrong. So it's often the fact that a 3-year-old will not actually have that ability to understand where they've crossed the line. Where with your 6 and 7-year-old is that you can see that an action has been done, and their body language will show that they know that they are in the wrong for doing something. Again, it's just having those open conversations. And I always go with a child who feels comfortable with you will communicate with you. So, and the way that you approach them. So if you approach a child in a hostile manner, they're going to shut down completely. Open conversation. And again, this is where I use, and I say, well, you need to let me know what happened. And often they had a reaction, but they weren't the instigator of the situation. So finding out what happened and leading up on it would also create a sense of a relationship building and trust in the fact that you're taking the time to acknowledge. The child is seeing that you are taking the time to unpack what happened here, and immediately not just blaming them and putting them in the thinking corner or timeout or wherever you want to where we put them. It's having that dialogue with them so that they can understand. You might get to the end of it and realize that they're the one that instigated it and it did not pan out well. But as long as you have unpacked it, I mean, I had that situation this evening, is that my 14-year-old said to me, I'm going to go and annoy my sister. So when she's doing her homework and it's not going to end well. So the risk was there, and I gave her the option. She decided in the end not to do it. But it's finding out all the information at first that you can.
Yeah, and sometimes that's so frustrating because the story, you want to get back to the stove, and the story is longer and longer and longer. And that's what you said earlier with stopping. Sometimes when it comes to communicating through the different stages, that is always really important, is taking the time to stop and actively listen. And only then can you know how to adapt your communication style in that moment, because you can truly understand the picture. So when we look at barriers to open communication, some of the things are in this age group that you're dealing with Tanya. Often you'll say, how did your day go? Fine. What did you do today? Nothing. So
Yes.
how, as a parent, do I navigate through that to truly understand what is going on in my child's world?
It is a little bit more difficult in the life of a preschooler to ask. So your 15 months and obviously up, it's a little bit difficult. And that's where I think the communication is. Just keep on track with the communication that you have from the school to find out what is going on that day. And that's where the communication that you receive from the teacher, so you can start a conversation point. Because at that age, it's a lot for them. I mean, these are children that have a nap during the day because it gets a bit too much for them. So the day gets broken up into different sections for them to be able to ask them, find out what they've been doing, keep on track. And once you start on one conversation, yes, I always say to my children, I'm going to ask for my money back because you did nothing at school today. Start a conversation on something and let it grow on there. With our 5-year-olds, I do listen to the conversations that go on in the reception or when their parents collect them in the afternoons. And it's quite nice because they do tend to start on a topic or say something that happened. Sometimes it might be so-and-so hit me today, but that's a starting point on a conversation.
Exactly.
And I do it's quite sweet. I see the parents having a look to see what's on the menu, and then they ask, did you have lunch? How was this today? How was your extramural? So build on the things that their life is going to be encapsulated with that day. With your older ones, you have to really, it's a lot of trying. Otherwise, the car can be very, very quiet for me in the afternoons where they wouldn't keep quiet. Is now you have one-word answers of, so what happened at school today? Nothing much.
Yeah.
Okay. Any Valentines in? No. Okay. So it does but now you'll see that once you've opened the conversation, now when you get home in the evening, they might come to you afterwards and broaden on that you were talking about earlier. So as you get as they're going into their teenage years and a little bit older, is patience is the name of the game with that one. Because if you push too hard for something, you will immediately get a, I don't know, or a shrug. It's much easier with your little ones. But again, they could come up with a story that they saw a dinosaur today.
You don't quite know what
it might not have been real, but so the stories get bigger when you're little, because when they have your attention, they will just keep on going. And that you can pick out the reality of what happened during the day there.
I think the big thing is connection for me. Be connected with your children, especially the young school age children, the 6 to 12, where they're working through industry versus inferiority. So they are figuring out, how am I valuable? So if you know that there was a particular event at school, or if you kind of in communication with the teacher, you know what their schedule is, you are able to start those conversations and highlight their competencies for them so that they start to see those as strengths. And that's why it's so important to be aware of, the stages that they're at, so that you as the adult can navigate those conversations. And like you say, start the conversations. So how was your day? It's fine. It's not going to work. But how did the oral go that you were supposed to do in the second lesson? Did you see Joe at break today? Was the tuck shop lady there today? Things that are in their world that you can highlight their competence and then get them to talk on their strengths. That's so valuable.
Yeah.
And then in this age group, addressing conflict. Yes, Blanche.
Sorry, I just want to jump in there because it kind of just takes me through the whole journey of raising my own boys.
Yes.
And I used to play a game with them in the afternoons, and especially with boys, raising boys, they don't often give you much information. So I would play this game like, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? And it kind of just created a lot of that opened the door to seeing what is busy happening with them in their little hearts, in their minds, what has been happening at school, what is going on with their friends, and all that. And it was on them, not really me asking the same question every day, which became quite fun.
I I like the introspection in that. And I think that's a valuable skill that they need to learn when they start to 10, 12, 13. That's a fantastic activity. Yeah. Obviously, managing conflict through communication with a preschooler is very different than a 11-year-old. You know, the 11-year-olds want to be independent about it. They don't always want you to step in to assist with conflict. So the conversations are different. But preschooler, obviously, you know, conflict is handled a little bit differently. So if you've got a preschooler at home and they bring conversations about conflict with a particular child, or what often happens in that environment, Tanya, is repetitive conflict with a particular friend in class. What can parents do to empower their child in that situation when there is repetitive conflict with a particular child? And that will usually follow them into grade R, grade 1, the younger school years.
It does happen. And if you are sort of in that same school, they are going to eventually end up in the same class. They might skip a year where they aren't. I would encourage the parents to actually speak to the teacher, because you don't know what the dynamics in the classroom are at that time. So very often, if we have a parent that comes and says their child is complaining about one particular child and the name comes up in conversations constantly, is that we will sometimes find that the children might gravitate to each other during the day. So they might fight like siblings, and we try and part them and find other things for them to do. So we'll purposely find them a different activity and not put them next to each other during the day, but they will gravitate to each other. So that is where we speak to both sets of parents and just say what we are trying to actually do within the class environment. And then obviously encourage them that whatever we are doing at school is consistency. So we very much discourage parents is that obviously if a child is experiencing children that are inflicting certain behavior on them, is to not retaliate in the same way, because then we are just teaching that is acceptable. So we do have, obviously at a certain point, you as a parent, you say, well, you know what, just hit them back. And we don't want that, because then we're starting something. And so we obviously discourage that as much as possible. We are about positive discipline. So we will, again, I think communication between the teacher and the parent is very important to make sure that you are on the same page when it comes to it. So you are finding out what the issue with the child is. Sometimes we've had an issue with a child and that child has not been in the other child's class. So they see them on the playground. They don't necessarily like that child, or they've remembered that child from 2 years prior. So I think keeping open communication with the teacher and being fully transparent about it. Also, what we have noticed is children will mirror us. So if we are, which I have seen before, is that if a parent has a particular issue or niggle about a child, is that they will immediately ask the child and say, how was your day? Did so-and-so hurt you today? And if a child has your attention and they realize that's what's getting your attention right now, I'm going to go with it. So we ask parents also not to try leading questions with their children of, did they hurt you today? What did you do? We rather wait until the child has expressed to us, and then we kind of go with that. But I would encourage as much transparency as possible.
And then to empower them. So when they do bring it to your attention and you are noticing a pattern, to rather than, like you say, ask about the child or ask leading questions, to rather empower our children with things, with sayings and terminology like, well, tell your friend how that makes you feel. You know, 100%. I feel hurt by that. I didn't like what you're doing to me. Please stop. So we want to empower them with that conflict management language. And that again comes from us as parents.
And also looking for advice from the teacher themselves to actually highlight when somebody is doing something they don't like. Go to the teacher, so the teacher can actually try and encourage whatever's going on, so that they all are basically having the same conversation and trying to solve the same problem. So empowering them.
And sharing with your teacher the language that you use in your home as well, so that they can bring it into the classroom. Because I think empowering those little ones to manage that conflict is very, very important. Obviously, bearing in mind that when we look at stages of development, they're only really able to start applying that when they reach the school age. When they are still in the preschool age and they're dealing with initiative versus guilt, it's very difficult to put that into place. They start playing with it, and we need to give them the language to start using it and playing with it. But the understanding behind it and the appropriateness of the use really starts to come in when they're looking at industry versus inferiority. So we need to plant those seeds when they are in the previous stage of development so that it can follow them through into the school age development.
Yeah.
So we've been talking now about those children from infancy all the way to around about 12 years old. And we're just quickly going to look at Tanya's top 5 tips for this particular age group. And Tanya, you can just walk us through your tips and why you find them so valuable. Okay.
So yes, I put down there active and present listening. So when you are engaged with your child, regardless if they are 3 or if they are 12, is put your phone down, let them know if you aren't going to give them 100% of your time right now. So if you a parent that is busy cooking or you're busy talking to somebody, acknowledge them, tactile. I can hear you. I'm just talking to whoever it may be. Active listening, it shows that you're invested in the conversation that they are having with you. Control your emotions, acknowledge your child's feelings. So even when they are that little, the smallest little thing can set them off. And you have to acknowledge the fact that you know that they're upset about it, and you are going to take this very seriously because you don't want them to be upset. Same with if they are 12 years old and they're having an emotion, acknowledge that emotion, and that it might not be a very easy conversation to have. But acknowledging those feelings is vital. Showing empathy, relate and use I feel. So I think in that moment, it's our children forget that we are parents.
And people.
And we are trying to navigate adulting and parenting and all the things that go with it. And it's good to sometimes let them know that how you feel in a situation. So I have made it, if I have been unreasonable, I will go to my children and I will explain to them if my behavior was not reasonable and explain how I felt at the time. So it gives them, they can have a better understanding that I'm also human. Talk about things that interest your children. So each child in our preschool years, they learn and develop at their own speed, but they also have interests that captivate them. So go with those interests that are captivating them. And also at the moment, I've got children, it's music, and it's now no longer Princess Sophia, it's mascara. And so we kind of, we fight a lot about the hair straighteners. So build on those conversations that are interesting them at the time. And then patience. Do not rush a conversation. As I said, a preschooler, once they have your attention, they will grab onto it and keep on going. As they get older, it will dissipate a little bit. And then by the time you get to the older age, your pre-tweens, you start the conversation and you might have to wait a day for it to actually manifest into something. But yeah, so I think from what I've experienced, and again, I'm well taught in this, but as a parent, there's no handbook. So you really have to navigate it. You know your child best. And again, just don't be too hard on yourself.
I think that's so important. As parents, we want to do the right thing all the time, and we are only human. But I think
we make
attending
mistakes.
Workshops like this, creating awareness and being aware of what our children needs at any time is essential, really, really essential. So Blanche, if we move on to the older children and we look at going from the innocent little 12-year-old into 13, 14. So we're entering into that adolescent phase where they are struggling with identity, struggling to understand how their values match their social identity. What can we see there? Well, how can we create safe and supportive environments for them at that age?
I think what's so important is to realize that you grow with your child. So you don't just arrive to the teenage years, you've now put all those kind of things in place. You've listened to them, you've built trust with them. And I think it's very important to be approachable. This is going to be the time where you're maybe going to share some of your stories, some of your shortfalls when you were a teenager, or some of the things that you struggled with. But first of all, um, to listen more than you speak, create that environment for your child where you are constantly hearing them, your ears are open. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and not to always just give them advice, but to kind of prod that kind of communication, asking open-ended questions with them, so yeah, be approachable, and then validating what they are feeling is very important.
That is a big part of it, validating what they're feeling, because at this age where they are struggling with, should I feel that way in the situation? Us as the grown-ups there need to then create the safe environment by saying it's okay. It's good, it's acceptable to react like that. And in this time,
absolutely.
this time of conflict and difficulty for them understanding the social environment, how would active listening really contribute? I mean, I know that you say to listen more than you actually speak, but active listening includes responding, includes reaction to show your understanding of where they're at. So how does that contribute to this age and work in this age group?
Yeah, I think we all know that social media and, their phone plays a very big role. And I think that's where we need to role model um, appropriate behavior with them. So when they come and they speak to you, to put your phone down, just like you said, Tanya, earlier, that, for the toddlers, we go down to their level. Well, going to our teenagers' level is really that, putting our phone down, showing them with our body language, sitting a little bit forward, showing them that we are listening, we are completely focused on them, because I feel for our teens in this day and age. Everything is being thrown at them as social media. That is where their friends hang out. So I think maybe communicating physically, it's very different for our kids than it was for us way back when we grew up. So for me, it's really about being present, being available, being very present, very present, and encouraging them, to be open and to share, without having to preach at them, so before they say anything, to listen and not try and fix anything for them, to kind of navigate that own problem solving, situation for them. And also react. Yes.
We do that by paraphrasing, showing your understanding and showing that you are listening. So if your teenager is sharing something about the day, and you could say, it sounds like it was really challenging when so-and-so pushed in front of you in the tuck shop line, without conflicting their idea, without going, so did you hit them? Or what did you do then? It's kind of I hear that you did this and this, or felt this and this. So you kind of want to give them a little bit back, show them that you hearing them and listening without judgment. Because at the end of the day, in this age, they want to solve the problem themselves. They don't necessarily want you to come with the answer. But like you said, that active listening is so important and so valuable for them.
And I think what is very important is, and I think we all have our different values, but if your value system is respecting others, this is such a fantastic age where you're really role modeling that to your children. When they come and they talk to you about something that happened at school, maybe the teachers that don't listen, or this, that, not to go, oh, really? Yes, I also find that, but to really, if your value is to be positive and kind and respectful, to role model that and ask them, what made you feel like that? What makes you say that? And really make them think through their emotions, through their thinking, and I think that is very important. Yeah,
and show curiosity, because that shows them the value of their opinion. And trusting. It makes them want to engage further. But curiosity really does help a lot when it comes to that age group. They also have a tendency to push you away, but with adolescents, Blanche, I'm sure you've seen it. As soon as they start pushing away and you acknowledge what you've heard and you acknowledge hearing them and acknowledge that feeling of, okay, I see you've had enough now, let's talk later. It kind of creates that door for them to come back when they're ready to open again.
And I think it reminds you as their parents, you're their safe space, and nothing will change that, you know. So they can come to you. That's why it's so important not to be judgmental when they come to you. And listen, we are human beings. We are going to have. I've got a face that you see what's on my face. You can see my emotions, and you know it's very important that when you set time aside for your child, to become calm yourself, you know, to forget about what has been going on in your own life for that day and really focus on what they are saying because they are important. And, you know, when you give them a positive response, you know, it encourages them to come and share again in the future, you know, those things that are maybe otherwise would be closed off, you know, if we approach it with a very negative approach, then they will likely not share those kind of emotions with you in the future again.
Definitely. Tanya, did you want to add?
Just case in point, you know, we would talk about most social media and so on, and children are on their phones. And my daughter showed me a photo of a girl, and she was going out, and my immediate reaction was wrong because immediately I passed my judgment, and I think she got a bit of a fright because mine wasn't very pleasing. And where I should have taken a step back and should have said to her, what do you think about what she's wearing tonight to go out? What do you think? So my reaction caused her to shut down and then just put her phone away. So now I can't gauge what she actually thought about what was going on. So that was about 2-3 days ago. So I learn as I'm going.
We all learn as we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
Patience, like you said earlier, and having grace with yourself. But I think, you know, self-regulation when you have an adolescent in the home is so essential because as parents, we get worked up really easily. We've got stress, we've got this going on, and then you hear that your child's at conflict at school or they're stressing about a certain thing. To regulate yourself first before you start to initiate those conversations. What happens, Blanche, you know, with this age group, they will often want to engage. We want to be there, but they run into their room and shut the door when they come home, and you don't see them again until maybe the smell of food is good enough to lure them out later on. So as a parent, wanting to be there and wanting to engage, what do we do?
I think again, you know, you grow with your children and you know kind of what they like and what they dislike, you know, and if you've seen a pattern that your child is just in their room all the time and they're disengaged or they avoid certain conversations, you know, as a parent, you just want to fix things, you know, and as a parent, I've made so many mistakes, but I find most of my feel good stories were if I get down again to their level, I get and I think of something that interests them and maybe basketball. Say, hey, who would like to go and play a little bit of basketball? Or gosh, you know, I know you've been wanting to watch this movie. How about I make some popcorn and we watch a movie together, you know, and just kind of set that relaxing tone that we don't always have to talk about serious things, you know, but just to kind of get down to their level again, show interest in something that they like, you know. Tanya, you were saying about how your daughter showed you that video, and I can relate to that, but maybe go and sit down on her bed and say, okay, show me more. Gosh, is that what they wear now, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and just show some interest, you know, and they will start talking inevitably, you know. Or you do take them a plate of food, Sam, and you and you give them something to eat, and you plop down and you just start a very casual conversation. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, can I just throw in there? Is that the same with your preschoolers as well, with the age that we sort of dealing with now, is what I'm dealing with, is you don't need to wait for a situation to have that conversation about it. Is that very often they are so out of their space at that moment. They aren't taking anything in you're saying. So have those conversations at random times when it's calm and there's no conflict about, and that you'd be able to gauge a bit better what their reaction to the situation is. And that works the same with your let's say not two, but your three-year-olds and up, is give them a scenario and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I think, as the grown up and the adult here, we need to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
We can't, like you said earlier, Blanche, to not always do the serious stuff. Just because you have an adolescent and a young adult in the house doesn't mean that any conversation needs to be an adult conversation or needs to be a serious conversation. There's still room for play, especially the adults, between 13 to 17, 18. There's still space to shoot them with the water pistol in the room and get engaging in that way. Or sometimes, randomly go and lie on his bed and I'll just start talking about all the fabulous things about him and then really irritate him. But that is, the way that they accept love more than you going and imposing it on them. Those kind of random, but again, it comes down to connection. What is my child going to react to? And sometimes as a parent, especially in this age that we're talking about now, where our children become different. It's not the person that I thought you were 2 years ago, they're going through their conflict. They're trying to understand. They're trying to match their social personality with their value system at home. And that is an inner conflict that they battle through. So it's up to us in this age group to really be consistent in the values, be consistent in the expectations, and to role model healthy communication engagement. Those.
I like what you said. I like what you said just now about we are the adults. We must never forget that.
Yeah.
Yes, you said something like we need to be regulated before dealing with certain conflict. Absolutely, because we mustn't forget that we are the adult in the relationship, and our kids are still, even though they're teenagers and they're going to be tough and they're going to say things that maybe sometimes hurt us, that is very personal. I know they don't mean it. They're going to say that to the person and to the parents that they feel safest with, and it's up to us to still show them that unconditional love, ignore, that saying that says, don't sweat the small stuff, So if your child's room is messy, why are we sweating that small stuff? Let's rather focus on the values, Sam, like you're saying, what values are we teaching our children? Have they disrespected someone? Yes, that is a conversation we will have when both is ready to talk about it. And I think that is where we're learning with our teens. We need to start, we need to relearn their body language, when they are open to have that conversation, and you will see it in their body language.
Yeah, and it always happens at the most inappropriate time. Just got to go.
Yes.
I need to get to work, and then suddenly they just start babbling, and you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to be late because I've got to hear this.
Yes.
Yeah, and you've got to put things into perspective and be there.
I'm just thinking back on situations in our household is you got two adults in the household, or some where your family has got two parents in there, is I've made the mistake of underplaying my husband when he's been trying to, but I've known the story of where it's come from the entire day. And then we do have words because we aren't on the same page, and it's, don't interfere with me, I'm parenting. So I must hold back, and we'll have a private conversation about it afterwards. But to have that moment in front of the children where you kind of are in limbo with, your parenting style, so you live and learn. But the biggest compliment that I've ever heard is if your child gets in the car and they literally just emotions are just coming out, it's because it's the safest space in the world for them, is that they've been trying to keep it in the whole day. And to control it, and you are their safe space that they can let loose and have a moment in the car. So
exactly.
Yeah,
You need to be grateful for those moments, and hold on to them. So Blanche, you're going to take us through your top 5 tips for this age group.
I can do that.
Let's see what you had to say for us tonight. Let's just go. There we go. Can you see it, Blanche?
I can't see it.
Yep.
Can you guys see it?
I can see it
There
now.
we go.
There we go.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, I said definitely to listen more than you speak, let your teen share their thoughts without interrupting or judging them. Sometimes they just need someone to hear them. So instead of just giving them that advice or criticism, allow them to express their thoughts and their feelings. Active listening builds trust, and it encourages them to, speak more regularly with you with regards to what is important to them. And then I said, choose your battles wisely, or pick your battles. Not everything needs to turn into a fight. Focus on the important issues, like their values and safety, instead of small things, like we said earlier, their messy rooms. So we want to build children of character. Those are the things we focus on. Those are the things that we want to address.
Oh, sorry.
And then no worries. Then I also said that we want to show unconditional love. Our love is not conditional. We will love you if you behave like this. We will love you if you perform in school or things like that. So even when they mess up, we need to remind them that we love them. They need to know that our love isn't based on how well they behave. That is where we can tell the stories of how we messed up, as teenagers. And, we turned out okay, we think. And then to set clear expectations and boundaries, just like when they were small 2-year-old 3-year-olds, and we teach them the boundaries to keep them safe. We're still setting those clear expectations and boundaries for them. And they still need clear rules and fair consequences when they know what's expected, because it still makes them feel safe, and they will turn out a little bit more responsible. And if they break a rule, you need to follow through with a consequence without yelling. And this teaches responsibility. And then I've said number 5, be present and available. Be there for them. Even if they act like they don't need you, they will always need you.
Yes.
So spend time with them, show interest in what they like, and be ready to talk when they are ready to talk. Watch their favorite show with them. Even if you don't like it, it opens up communication, or a door for bonding. If they start talking late at night and you're really tired, try not to brush them off,
Yes.
let them come and lie on the bed with you and let them just open up.
Mm.
And so on. So yeah, they might seem very independent, but they still need our guidance as parents, and they still need us to be their safe space for them.
That's so true. They get all big and grown up, especially the boys, become unrecognizable, but they still need their parents to keep those boundaries and structures in place and consistency.
Absolutely.
Because that is what allows them to become the true people that they are meant to be.
That's
So,
for sure.
in summary, if we think about what we've discussed tonight, then it's important to self-regulate. That, I think, is very, very important. It doesn't matter what age your child is at. You, as the parent in the home, need to be able to self-regulate and keep yourself in check before trying to keep everybody around you in check. Be aware of your child's developmental level and communication needs at those levels, as we've discussed tonight. You can see through the discussions this evening how your child's needs change in every developmental stage, and why it is so important to keep in connection with your child and serve them as they are serve them in the way that they need it in that particular age. Then to practice active listening that we discussed this evening, respond without judgment, avoid negative language. Consistency and clarity, doesn't matter what age group they're in, those are always very, very important. And of course, when it comes to any communication, the 7 C's of communication are essential throughout the developmental stages, but in appropriate ways. So to use correct role modeling, correct behaviors, to show that, to be complete, to be concrete in your interactions, concise. We can't spend a whole lot of time lecturing at any of the age groups and expect them to be able to keep keep with us and understand what we mean. Coherent, courteous always, and clear in your expectations. I think that sums up how we need to be relating to our children and communicating with our children so that they can be empowered to be the wonderful children that they are meant to be and the fantastic adults we hope for them to be one day. I'm going to look at our Q&A. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Blanche, while
one
I
thing
look at the questions.
one thing I wanted to add, which I really try to not forget to add, is, you know, we make mistakes in how we sometimes respond to our children. And, you know, one thing that I've learned that is so powerful is the act of saying, I'm sorry. I actually behaved inappropriately, or my reaction wasn't what I wanted it to be. Let's try again, you know. And I think that is so important, to show that humbleness to our children, you know, that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to come back and say, I'm sorry, let's try again. Let's try and, you know, talk this through again.
Exactly. And that is that role modeling we spoke about. That's why it's so important. It makes it okay for them to make mistakes and to come back and reconnect with you. So we had a question earlier from Olivia where she said she had a problem with conflict, repetitive conflict with the same child, and it continued without intervention. And the teachers felt that what the child was complaining about was not valuable. I think, you know, that it is difficult, and to feel that you're not being heard is really, really difficult, especially when you want to stand up for your child. And we as parents need to be there for our children. Yes, we need to advocate for them. We need to speak up. And I think if you're not satisfied by the reaction that you receive from the teacher, go to the grade head, you know, follow the paths of communication, but continue through that path of communication until you feel heard and validated. Because if your mom gut or your dad gut, your parent gut is saying to you, something is not right here, and I need to understand it so that I can support and empower my child to deal with it, then follow that path of communication until you get the answer that you need. In Tanya, being an operational head of a school, what advice would you give to this parent that's not getting joy from the teacher?
Exactly what you have said is that I always encourage the parents to go directly to the teacher, because they need to have a rapport. They need to have a open and transparent relationship.
Of course.
But should they not get any joy from it, then they have got my number. They can come directly to me, where I will go and have a look. I will go and monitor, observe, but take all the information that I can to give them the most concise answer. Because at the end of the day, a child, we don't want them to experience school as a place that they're fearful of, that they want to come to, regardless if it is another child or a, God forbid, a teacher or whatever it may be. Is that it has to be a happy place. And if it's not dealt with, we will see it come out in different ways. The child might start withdrawing from the group. The child might their sleeping pattern, their eating pattern, etc., etc. We want to avoid it getting to that point. So I would tell the parents, go through all the channels until you actually get joy with it. You need to advocate for your child.
Definitely, it's important. Somebody else asked us, what's the best way to help our 13-year-old navigate the awkward phase of transitioning from junior school to high school without being prescriptive and allowing them to find their own way and make the right decisions? Blanche, do you have some ideas there?
That's a very good question, you know, and something that I've personally had to, you know, go through with one of my children. And, you know, as a parent, you know, I always say from 13 to 14, it just always seems like such a big gap from being the big person in the primary school and now going to be no one in the high school, you know, and it can be very lonely for some of them. And again, you know, communication is so important. You know, encouraging them to build those friendships, and it might not be easy for some of them to build friendships. You know, going to a new high school, having to start from scratch. Really, just being that listening ear, you know, and constantly encouraging them, validating who they are, you know, as little people, you know, that is that is what I continue to try and do, you know, especially with my one son that really struggled with that, fitting in. And I think it comes back to those values, you know, that are kind of in confrontation with one another. This is what my friends like to do, but actually I don't like this. So where do I fit in, you know? And eventually you will find those friends with the same values, you know, and that's okay. Yeah. I don't know if that's answering the question.
Yes, no, definitely. I think we're all facing that at the moment. I'm also facing that with my son. And it is a challenging time, but the best that you as a parent can do, like you say, you don't want to prescribe to them how they must enter in that environment, but to just consistently remind them who they are, what is amazing about them, and that they are loved regardless of anything and beyond measure, and where they come from, what's important, and allowing them to speak out. Tanya?
And also just to remind them that they aren't the only one that feels that way.
Yes.
Is that there are a lot of children. I mean, going to a new high school with new friends and so on is the anxiety of going. Is that you will find the group that you belong with. You just have to be patient, and you can use your own judgment. If that's something you feel uncomfortable with, then, you know, explore a little more.
Yeah. And as parents, we need to be
100%.
patient. You know, you can't, when they come to you with that same difficulty in 3 months' time, you need to consistently listen and consistently remind them about their strengths until they are ready to navigate independently. Okay, there aren't any more questions in the Q&A at the moment, and we are almost out of time. Thank you so much, Blanche and Tanya, for joining me tonight. I think it was really, really valuable, and I hope that everyone that attended has a wonderful evening. Stay safe, and hope we will see you in 2 weeks' time again. Thank you so much, Blanche and Tanya.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.